Shalom Aleichem. We wanted to have a shiur recorded for the end of this week because we're leaving town, so wanted to make sure that we have this, and with the realization that nobody will be on today because I'm sure no one finished the Marmakomas yet. So we're a little bit early in the game, but want to just have us covered for the end of this week. And after this, I'll send out the Marmakomas for the following 2 weeks because some of myself included will be on break part of the time. So we'll have the 2 weeks of Marmakomas and then come back from there. Okay, we have this amazing sugya here. Vasu Yasser Rechista V'Kamar Kufal from Beis and Psachim. Rechista sat B'Shmei Nafshe in the name of himself. Hada Amrit Shnei Makom Tzarech Levarech Lo Amrin Ela B'Dvarim She'ein Tuna Bracha L'Chaim Mukaiman. That if your Mishana Makom causes a chiyuv a bracha, Shnei Makom causes a chiyuv bracha. That's only by things that are not Tuna Bracha L'Chaim Mukaiman. They don't need a bracha in their place. Avadvarim Tuna Bracha L'Chaim Mukaiman. Things which need the after bracha in their place, and tzarech levarich. My time of the kiva kama hadar. You don't need to make a bracha because when you come back, you're coming back to the original kfiyas, and we'll see in a minute what's shot in that din of coming back to original kfiyas. So that's the shita of Rechista. V'sheisus amar echadzeh v'chadzeh tzarech levarich. That both, whether it's dvarim she'ein tunim or dvarim she'tunim bracha l'cham, they both need to have a bracha. So before we see the Meisvei, just to understand what is shot in this din of Dvarim Tuna Bracha according to Rav Chisda. So Rav Shban learns over here that it's a din in the. Oh, a second. I didn't think anybody's Shalom Aleichem. Okay, if we just start, I'll just restart again. That we wanted to just have a shiur now because I'll be going out of town next couple of days and make sure we're covered. So I figured everybody's going to be just coming on the recording, but glad to have some real live people there. So good. Okay, so I'll just restart the Gemara. V'su Yasser Rechista V'Kamar V'Shmei Nafshe. Kufal from Beis. That Rechista says in the name of himself. Hada Amrit Shnei Makom Tzarech Levarech. Lo Amrin Ela B'Dvarim She'ein Tuna Bracha L'Chaim Mukaiman. We're only talking about Shnei Makom that we passed the Nalik of Yochanan before. Rather, we do need Shnei Makom doesn't require a bracha. That's only by things that are not Tuna Bracha L'Chaim Mukaiman. They don't need require a bracha in the place that you ate. The bracha achrona. Things which require bracha achrona in the place that you ate, ain't tzarech levarich. That shinei makom does not create a mechayev to make a new bracha. My time the kiva kama hadar. According to Chisda, you come back to the original kfiyas, and therefore it's not mechayev a bracha. V'sheisus amar echadzeh v'chadzeh tzarech levarich. Sheisus holds that whether it's dvarim tunim or dvarim she'ein tunim bracha l'cham, they both require a bracha, a new bracha when you come back, or it's a shinui makom is chayav a bracha, whether it's varmatunim and tunim. So we're going to have to understand really the depth. What's really the nekudas hamachlokas between Rav Chisda and Rav Sheisus. So before we try to understand their machlokas, what is shot in Rav Chisda's din itself? Rav Chisda's din that says that it's the varmatunim. We say the kiva kamar hadar. So we saw the Rashbam over here learns that what that means, the shot in the words Dvarim B'Tunim Bracha L'Chaim Koiman. The Rashbam learns, he says Kolomar Bracha Chashuva B'Fnei Atzman. Things which need a specific bracha afterwards, they're specific. So the Rashbam seems to learn that we find other halachas when there's a certain mila to a bracha which is specific over a general bracha, such as din kedima. Like we know that we make a bracha of mizonos or adama or eitz before we make a shakal. We make an eitz before an adama. An adama, since it's more general, it covers whether it's from a tree or from the ground. B'diavad, you would with an adama. So eitz is more specific, so therefore it has a kedima. The more specific a bracha is, the more it's chashuv. So those things which require a bracha achrei memkoman, which is a specific bracha on what you ate, so then those things are more chashuv. Like you have a specific bracha afterwards. Whether if you ate mizona, if you ate pas, then it's benching. If it's mizonos, it's al michya. If you ate Paris Eretz Yisrael, then it's Allah eitz. So the very specific brachas afterwards, they're more chashuv. So part of the chashivas is that Chazal gave to that bracha, because the specific is that they have to also be benched. You have to mevarach them in the place that you ate. That's a chelik of the chashivas of the bracha. So therefore, all these brachas which need a specific bracha afterwards, they have the category of a bracha of a dvar matunin bracha la'achrayim u'kaiman. They require the bracha to be in its place. That's part of the chashivas of the bracha. That's the shita of the Rashbam, and the nafkamin is that the din dvar matunin will apply to not only pas and mizonos, it'll apply also to all the periods Eretz Yisrael. Anything which requires that this. Sorry.
Does Rebbe see a specific raya that it's because it's a specific bracha as opposed to just chashuva? I thought it was just because it was chashuv. How's Rebbe seeing that?
Because the Rashbam says the words kolomar. Whenever there's just a klal in the Rishonim, whenever they say kolomar, they're coming to take it out of kipshuto. There's something that was difficult to them. So he says kolomar bracha chashuva b'fnei atzman. They have a bracha chashuva b'fnei atzman, meaning that if it's a specific bracha. So I understand his words. And he said it before also. He says dvar she'enin tunim or could go on mayim or peros she'enin tunim bracha chashuva b'fnei atzman elabrei nefashos rabos. They don't need a specific important bracha on their own. So the Rashbam is madrash the fact that it's on its own. He says it does it twice,
as opposed to a general bracha.
Right. So he's including this in the overall chashivas that we have. We give different. Like I give an example of kedima that we have. That's one of kamina in this klal. They have kedima because they're chashivas. So another din. Rashbam is learning that another specific din in the chashivas. So the specific bracha has to be ben koman. And therefore, according to the Rashbam, since then in the specific bracha, it's going to apply to all foods which have the specific bracha achrona, which will be also zayin and minim, peris, and yayin as well. So yayin and peris of zayin minim will be included in this. Tosfos we saw disagrees. He says that if that's the case, then what's the raya that? What do we have? We had a kasha before in Rabbi Yochanan, and the whole that said by shinu, by yayin doesn't need shinu is not machayev b'nu bracha by yayin, and we slugged it up because we said that we have a tiyufta on him. Shinu yayin ein soch levarach tiyufta Rabbi Yochanan. Why is it tiyufta Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan only said his din by yayin, and yayin according to Rashbam should be a dvarim shetuni bracha lachem ukayman, which have the chashivas of not being a hefsek according to Mechista. So the Rashbam already asked this kasha on himself, and he said that it must be that first of all for the lashon of Rabbi Yochanan it's mashma that means not only yayin but even other things as well, even just like apples and other pears, and also it must be just kimulahu l'chazal. If they asked this kasha, they must have known that Rabbi Yochanan was specifically talking about yayin. But it's difficult. It's difficult on the Rashbam. Tosfos has other problems also. So Tosfos comes out maskana that it's not a din in the bracha, in the cheshuvas of bracha. It's a din in the suda, the kviya suda. The dvarim tunim bracha was not a din. Copy of this the kiva hadid to consider like you're going back to your original kviyas. It's not because of the bracha. It's because of the kviyas of the suda, because of the cheshivas of suda. And the only things that has a real chashivas suda are those things your kaveya suda alayim, which would be pas or mizonos. And mizonos can turn into pas if you eat enough of it. It can be kaveya suda al mizonos. That's why you say kiddush also on mizonos and kiddush makom suda because mizonos has a din suda. So it comes out a very basic machlokas between the Rashbam and Tosfos on the other side, and the Rif and the Rush go along with the shita of Tosfos that it's a din in the kviya suda and dafka pas and chameshes mini dagon, but not in zayin minim of Eretz Yisrael. not anything which requires, and especially not yain as well.
So Tosfos agrees to the idea. I think it was brought in like the Ran, like it has to be specifically a mizonos that you could come to make a benching on, like lafuke, like donuts or something like that.
It would seem to be. I mean, it's not totally clear. There seem to be different lashonos of the Rishonim about that, but for Pashtus, that's what Tosfos seems to be saying. Tosfos the Rif, that things are kovei suda, and you can't be kovei suda on donuts. Or how much you eat. Just there is one lesson of Rishonim that some of them say, mashma also daisa. Like if you have like cooked wheat, like wheat cereal, which can't be kovei, never turn into benching. So Pashtus is Tosfos the Rif, not that way.
So would that apply only if they had already eaten that amount prior to leaving? Like this whole din is that once they're eating bread, so they have to come back to the mkoman. Let's say they only ate like, I don't know, one small piece, but they're not at the level that they didn't eat enough that they would now have to make benching on that mizonos yet, and then they left.
When we get to the Shulchan Aruch, we'll see. There seems to be the pashtus would be that it's already have been kovei suda for it to be have a chivas and suda, but does seem to be a machlokas achronim about the point you're asking. And less than a shir, there's Rabbi Kiveger about it. There is a discussion in Shulchan Aruch about that. In the Nosei Kelim Shulchan Aruch, but it's a good question. Okay, so again, the way we're explaining the Nekudas Machlokas, the Tosas Narashbam, is this din of Dvar Betuna Bracha Lachraim Konman that we say the Kiva Hadar, is that a din in the bracha or is it a din in the Suda? Now, there seem to be a few nafkaminas to this. If in this lumdus, there's a very major lumdus over here. It's mitzad the Suda, the Chshivas Asuda, or mitzad the Chshivas HaBracha. One nafkamina might be, and the Machlokas, the Rambam and the Rush, it's brought down in the beginning of Siman Kuf Pei Daled, that if a person left their meal without benching, b'shogeg, are they required to go back to the place that they ate to make the bracha there? So the Shulchan Aruch says that Hinai b'shogeg la Rambam yivarach b'makom shenizkar v'Rabbeinu Yonah v'Arush ganhu yachzor l'mkomo v'yivarach. Even if you left b'shogeg, if you left b'mezid, then there's a whole machlokas whether you were even yotze if you mentioned the new place. There's a whole rate about that, but the Shulchan Aruch brings down the Rambam holds that if you were left b'shogeg, you can be mevarach b'makom shenizkar. Whoever you remember, not machayvi to go back unless you left b'mezid. And according to Rabbeinu Yonah and the Rush, there also you're required to go back to the place and make and bench there. So what's in the Nekudas Machlokas? So it could be that's the shaila is that is the din Dvar Mitzuna Bracha Lacharvam Koimam, which means you have to bench back in that place, which really touches on the Machlokas Hill Beis Hill and Beis Shammai by someone who left and can go back and whether you have to move up and come or not. Beis Hill holds not like Beis Shammai. You don't have to. Or if you bench your yotze, the question is, are you still required to? Is there still a din l'chatchila to? So the Rambam holds you're not even required to. If you're up to shogeg, there's no chiyuv, and the whole. And so the chora, you could explain the machlokas that according to the Rambam, the din dvar mitzuna bracha b'mkamam is the din in the chashivas asuda. So the part of the chashivas of the suda is the kolzman the suda is going on. Now you just finished the suda, you weren't nekar from the suda yet. There's no hesach hadas in the suda, so now it's chashivas of the suda to bench right there in that place. But if you already left, you already had an akira and you left, and you had no das to eat anymore, then suddenly you remembered that I thought I benched. And remember my mashkiach when I in first year yeshiva Eretz Israel, he's talking about having kavanah when you bench. So I remember he said just like example of what goes on sometimes. He says that after a nice long day of learning, a kol guy goes home, he's having quiet supper with his wife, and they're schmoozing for a while, and then finally he says, they're about to get up and leave, and he said, "Did I bench?" And she said, "Yeah, I saw your lips moving." So we do face that sometimes. We're not sure if we benched or not. So he left the shogeg. He thought he realized later on that he's far away now and he'd been benched. According to the Rambam, since he was already, you could say he was already nekar from the Suda is already gone. He was already had an akira from it, has a hadas from it. So now to go back, there's no point in going back because if it's not beside the cheshivas of the Suda, there's no Suda left to be makshiv. So there's no point in going back. Masha Enken, if you hold that it's beside the cheshivas of the bracha, to make the bracha needs to be made in the place that you ate. So it's still, whether the Suda is going on or not, it's still the place that you ate. So that could be the shot in the rush, the Ben Yonah, the whole stuff to go back to Shugay, because true, the Suda is not going on, but it's still makom sha'achal. So it's the cheshivas of bracha, you're makshiv the bracha by going back to the place that you ate. It seems to be this Hakira, two Lashonos and the Mordechai, before the Mordechai even, the Rush says, when he explains this din, Su Yasser Rechista, Kamar Mishved and Nafshe, Hada Amart, Shin Welcome Sorach Levarech, Laman Elabedvarm, Shain Tuna Bracha Lachem. Kaiman, okay, here he brings compares V'yayin. Aval Dvarm Tuna Bracha Lachem, Kaiman, Kugan Pas, and then Dogan, like the Rif and Tosas, the Rush says, Sorach Levarech Hamotzi, my Taima, the Kivi Hadar. What does it mean, the Kivi Hadar? You're going back to your Kiyus. He says, Kolomar. Again, a kolomar always means that we're taking it out of kapshuta. What does this mean? It needs a pshat. It needs hesber. Kolomar, kevan she'im lo haya ochel kan haya tzorach lachzor l'mkom levarech. If you would not eat in the new place you're in, so then you would have to go back to bench in the old place. If you do eat in the new place, so then your mamshech yisud over there, then you can bench over there because you are bevarach l'mkom in the new makom. But essentially, if you did not eat anything over in the new place, you would have had to go back to the old place. Have ki'ilu hu adayin b'mkomo, v'gomer sudasa kan, v'vara kan birchas hamazon. So it's, since you would have to go back, it's like there's a leash on you from the original place, and since the din would be you would have to go back there, it's ki'ilu hu b'mkomo dami. We look at you ki'ilu, that leash holding you to force you to come back. If you don't eat anything new, makes it as if you're still back in the old place. So the Rush is clearly learning that it's a din in the Suda, that you have to be in the place of the Suda. And if you do, if you're the Kivi Hadar means not necessarily Kivi to the original place, but you're in the new place you are, if you start eating over there, then it's not considered a new Achila, but you're going back to the original Kviyas as if you're still in that place and eating. So it's a din of the Suda that you have to always be in that place. And the Mordechai actually has two Lashonos, which I think this might be good for the Machlokas, the Tosas, and the Rashbam, the Rif and everything. He says, Aval Dvarm Tunin Bracha Lachar Ben Koman, it's the Mordechai in our Sugya, Ein Sarach Levarach, my time, L'Kiv Kama Hadar. What does that mean? What does it mean, L'Kiv Kamar? Shahare Gomer Sudasa Hu Lava Kasuda Acheres, came to Sarach Levarach Lachar Ben Koman. It's considered the same Suda, and not a Suda Acheres. Because you're required to go back to make the bracha on that place. So that requirement considers it the same Suda. Yes, Meforshim, the Kivet Kama Hadar Shin Lo Yochal Kan, Yistarach Lachs Lamakum, Kviyu Sudaso, Levarach Bracha Shalachov. That's a din mitzad the bracha is mechayiv you to go back. So it's not mitzad the cheshivas a Suda, and like you're still b'mkomo, but the bracha is mechayiv you to go back, and therefore the bracha creates a matzah of that it's not considered a hesach hadas because you always are with that requirement inside the bracha to be back. Because it's again that would be more like the Rashbam side, the second shot, that it's mitzad the cheshivas of bracha. Okay, so now going with that. So we'll stay with that mahalo right now. That if we go a little further in the sugya. So the Gemara brings a brisa, a kasha from Chista, from the Bnei Chabura that were sitting down to. The brisa says they were mesubin lishtos, but the fact that it says akru agleim, they're okra themselves. So then that lends itself. The Gemara says to be. We're talking about dvarmitu and the bracha lacharmim koman. The fact that they're akru, and so since if they left mixas skanim there, mixas cholav skanim, so then they're allowed to leave without benching, and they're allowed to come back, and they don't need a new bracha. But if they didn't leave anybody there, then before they leave, they need to bench. When they come back, they need a new bracha. And it says they need a bracha l'mafreya and a bracha rishona. So what does that mean when it means bracha l'mafreya? Does it mean that before they leave, they need a bracha on what they already ate, and that's why it's called l'mafreya? Or does it mean that even if they forgot to bench or they didn't know they needed to, or whatever, and they came back after they left with nobody else there, then they still need a bracha l'mafreya? That they're not allowed to eat anything more until they first bench and then they make a new bracha rishona. Or does it mean that mafreya means only on the mafreya before they left? But when they come back, if they didn't make it yet, then they can keep on eating without a benching. Maybe they'll need a bracha rishona, but they're not going to need a bracha achrona. So that's a question. So we'll see how that's a machlokes rishonim. But the Rashbam learns the first way. The Rashbam seems to learn in the last Rashbam, kasha l'rechista. This is a kasha. If you hold that by leaving you need to bench, and when you come back, even when you come back you have to bench, that would show that even dvarim betunin bracha lachrayim l'komim, because we know we're talking about dvarim betunin bracha lachrayim l'komim, we're talking about something that has a kviya suited to it, because otherwise it wouldn't say the lashon nekru, the lashon akru, like the Brisa says, like the Gemara says. So that's a kasha of Rechista. Rechista said that dvarim betunin bracha lachrayim l'komim don't need a bracha. It's not considered hesach hadas. So the Rashbam explains kasha of Rechista, dila Rechista. Afila lo kazulim kaman ela gomer sudasan b'makom acher in tzarich levar tchila. Hova dain lo birach achrein. Rechista holds that dvarim betunin keeps you like you're in the middle of the suda. And even if you go to a new place, you would not need to make a new bracha because you're considered that you're choser to the same kviyus. V'haka muchach dafilu chazur l'mkaimam harishon tzarich levar tchila. Here you see from this brisa that even if you went back to the place you were eating, not only did you not eat in a new place, you went back to where you were eating, and still it says sarach levarach tefillah, you have to make a bracha first. Which Rashbam seems to understand that you have to bench first and then make a new bracha. So the Rashbam over here, okay, we'll come back to the Rashbam. There's a difficulty in the Rashbam. The Rashbam is holding that the svara, the chitzona of the Rashbam is that if I leave the place, I know I'm supposed to bench here, but if I left that place and I went somewhere else, I don't need to make a new bracha because I'm considered the kiva hadar. I'm still like in the middle of that suda. If that's the case, then kol sheken, if I come back to the same place, I shouldn't need to make a new bracha. Then kol sheken, I'm considered in the middle of the suda if I come back. That's the way the Rashbam learns. And therefore we have a kasha and a rechista, because here it's saying you come back, you still need to make a new bracha. Now this shaila we raised, whether if you did not make the bracha when you left and you left and then you came back, if you need a new benching or not. So that's really two lashonos of Tosfos. Tosfos starts off when it says Kishem Yotzin, Tuna Bracha Lamafreya, etc. So Tosfos starts off saying the mashmos, the pashat pshat is that Hechad Ikka Hesach Hadas. Why would it be that if you left, you have to make a new bracha? Because there's Hesach Hadas going on over here. So Lo Saga Shivar Perksum, let's see Ela Sak Shivar Perksum Amazon. That's good for what we're being a riot to from this brisa, is that there is a Hesach Hadas. That would be connected Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda holds by Dvar Mitun and Bracha Lechem Kamam. There's no Hesach Hadas when you leave. But we're bringing a riot for this brisa, Kasha and Rav Chisda, that there is Hesach Hadas. And therefore Kamash Malan, since it says you need a bracha l'mafreya, which refers to benching, you see the hesach hadas. Not only does it require a bracha rishona, it also requires a bracha achrona. Because hesach hadas is gomer the suda completely, and now your geniz is going to be considered a completely new suda. So you can't have one benching on two sudas. So then that requires you to bench first and then make a new bracha rishona. So he has a number of kashas on this. I'm not going to go through all right now. Number of kashas on this pshat. At the end, Tosfos says, Yish Litchos. You could be docha this whole thing. Dosa Michael Hayam. Oh, sorry. Leave that. Okay, we sort of have to see it, I guess. We'll go back to it again because it doesn't make sense without the ride doesn't make sense. He brings a raya from the Gemara in Brachos, Ketzim Avarchim. The Kamar Rabbah of Rav Zera Haba Achli. They were eating Suda, Sliku Taka Mikamayu. They took the table away. Isa the Ristana. They brought some new food. Rabbah Achal Rav Zera Lo Achal. Amalei Lo Savar Lamar Silik Asram Lechol. How are you eating it? He was silik. Like how could you keep eating? Amalei Ana Taka the Reish Galus something. I'm samach on the sfor of the das Reish Galusa, and therefore if he brought out more food, then I was not in Siach Das. Pashtin Lohaya Tzarech Levar Perks Amazon. Lama Lo Achal. If you don't need to bench, like you said before, that Hesach Das requires benching, then why would the other mandamar not eat it? Why would Rav Zera not eat it? Yish Litchos. You could be docha this whole raya. Dosa Michael Hayamura Bolechen. The Torah it was Balabat's reason. It wasn't because he had to bench that he didn't want to eat more, but because he had to wash because there was more bread in this. So maybe he didn't have to bench, but he didn't have to wash and make a new motzi. Because so then, and maybe the pshat over here is not in our sugya mitzad hesach hadas. Maybe there is no hesach hadas according to Rav Chisda. But the reason that it's requiring you to bench before you leave is because it's like either a gzera or like the lashon harush is an eitzah tova, that if I leave without benching, then I might spend too much time in the new place and either forget to bench or spend so much time over there that I'm going to pass the 72 minutes that I'm still satisfied for the original meal, then I won't be able to bench anymore. So it's like it's either an eitzah tova or a gzera to tell us that you have to do that. Then they won't be able to bench. Maybe the pshat is when you come back that the reason to bench some afreya is an eitzah tova, and when you come back, if you didn't do that, if you didn't follow the eitzah tova, that doesn't require you to now bench when you get back. So there's no chiyuv now to bench if you did come back to your place. Then all you would need then would be a bracha rishona, because if there's any sort of hesach hadas at all, then it's hesach hadas only like this, like the shamash had hesach hadas that we already spoke about way back with the balamor and everything. That the shamash from the Gemara and the Gemara and Chulin, he makes a new bracha rishona on every new piece of bread because he doesn't know he's going to get it, but he doesn't have to bench every time in between. You'll have one benching at the end for all the hamotzis.
So maybe, according to Tosfos's view, that the reason that they would have had to bench was because of hesach hadas. So that's not a gemar suda; it's just a hesach hadas. Is that correct?
So it would be considered a hesach hadas gomer.
Meaning, would that make any difference? Like, would he consider that now an end that because of chashivas suda, now the suda was already done, so it doesn't help him to go back. He's not tied, and now he would have to make a new benching, like, or it has no.
I think the combination of being osik in some new thing and leaving his place, leaving his mokum. So then, according to that lashon Tosfos, which is docha, but according to that lashon, it can be that I guess the hesach hadas is like unlike the he's not coming to cholik and the Gemara and Chulin. There, the shamash still stayed at the same place all the time. He just didn't know he was going to get more bread. Here, the fact that he left, and it's an isser to leave because of hesach hadas, and he left the isser. So then that hesach hadas would be with the shinin makom together with hesach hadas of getting involved in something else. He held that would require you to, like you're saying, that would end the suda. So when you come back, you have to actually bench because your suda had really ended. And chanami. Okay, so now it's just I'll just bring out an interesting aura, which the Marsha asked on the Rashban here. After we've seen the Tosfos, we can talk about this Marsha. The Marsha asks a kasha on the Rashban. The Rashban assumes that if you don't have to eat if you don't have to make a bracha if you eat in a new place according to Rabbi because the kiva hadar, even in a new place. So then kol sheken, if you come back to your original place that you're supposed to come back to, then you wouldn't have to make a new bracha. Ask the Marsha, it's really the opposite. It makes sense. It's really literally the opposite. Bishlema, if you're in a new place, if you don't eat anything, Cole's mind you didn't eat anything yet. So then, like we said, there's like a leash on you from the original place holding you to it that you're gonna have to go back to there. So it's constantly holding on to you as being makusher to the Rakam Rishon, to the Suda Rishona. So therefore, if you eat in a new place, since you're makusher, at the time you eat, you're still going, that shows you're coming back to the original Suda. That kesher makes it come back. Because you weren't allowed to bench in the new place you were. If you don't eat anything, you have to go back to bench where you were to begin with. So that chiv is going back, and you can't eat anything until you bench. In the old place, that keeps you makusher to the first Suda. Masha'enken, if you came back to where you were, and there you could bench, even if you don't eat anything. So the fact that you left and came back, so now there's nothing that's makashi. You're just there, but now you could bench without eating anything. So then, so now you are no longer makusha to that suda. So there's the fact that you have to make it bench when you come back is not a raya that you were not makusha before if you were the other place. He says bishleim according to Tosfos that all you'd have to make when you came back to the new place is bracha rishona, not bench, but bracha rishona. Not like it's mashma from the Rashbam to do everything. So the fact that you don't have to bench when you come back to the new place, you just need a bracha rishona. It shows that it's just a regular hesed hadas, and according to the second lashon of Tosfos, like the shamash, but it's not a completely a cure for the suda ever. That's why you don't have to bench. So then makes sense. Then being in another place or being back in the same place, neither of them are in a cure for the suda. But according to the Rashbam, you need to make a bracha rishona and a bracha achana. You have to bench first and then make a new bracha rishona. So then there's no kol sheken. There's no, the fact that you have to bench when you get back to your place, like it says in the Brisa, is not a raya at all to what it would be in the other place. That's his kasha on the Rashbam. So I think that possibly the Karni Rein has a teretz on the Marshal's kasha. Without going into that, it's just possible that this whole understanding is totally zebazeh. That according to the Rashbam, that what keeps you makusher is the bracha. So since manashach, you're going to have to make the bracha back where you were, unless you started a new suda. So then it's a good raya that if I don't have to make a new bracha in the new place, if I don't have to bench in the new place before I eat anything, then koshken, I don't have to bench, and I'm machshiv the bracha by going back to the old place. There's no chiyuv now to have to bench because I'm machshiv the bracha by being there, and eventually I will bench at the end. But according to Tosfos, if not for the fact that I only need a bracha rishona when I get back, then that would have showed me that my suda ended, and then there'd be no reason to go back. So this whole marsha and the Rashbam and the Tosfos seem to all be totally zebazeh in what we said before. We'll think about that. It's not totally clear in my mind, but it seems to be makusher. Now, just try to speak about a few more points here. That the Rif, like we said, holds like Tosfos that we're talking about pas and mazonos, and but the Rif paskins like Rav Sheshis. Like our Gemara seems to come to a maskana like Rav Chisda, and that's the way the Rashbam learns, and Tosfos learns also. At the end of the sugya, it says, the very end of the sugya, Tanya Kavasai Rav Chisda, Chaver Mishayim Asubim Lishtos Yayin Akru Agleyan V'Chazru Intzach Levarach. There, it says that if they're drinking yayin, they're oker agleyan. They came back, then they don't need to make a bracha. The Rashbam learns that it's a raya to his shita. That we see there's a lashon akira by yayin also. So we see that yayin is tunin bracha lachem koman, and it is tunin bracha lachem koman because of the chshivs of the bracha on yayin. And when you come back, you don't have to make a bracha, which is a raya to Rav Chisda, and that's the way we paskin. So Tosfos also learns paskins that way, like Rav Chisda. because of that brisa. Just that I think there's a girsa that they were just mesubim, not yayin. So that's a question if you're gores yayin over there or not, or it just means just a suda, just a stamaraita krista without yayin. The Rif, however, passes like Risheshis, because since we brought this whole raya of the Chaver and the Bnei Chabur that were okra gleim and went out, and when it comes back they need a bracha, that's a raya to Risheshis. So even the Rish says that even though at the end Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak answers that it's going according to Yehuda, that's a shinui dechuka, that's an answer, but we're not makabel that answer. The question is why not? The Rosh has problems with the Rif. Why not? What's weak about that? It's a gavaldic thing. It's gavaldic shot to say that we have a whole other brisa that says that Rabbi Yehuda is the one who holds that way, and not the Rabbanan. So it's a gavaldic. It's not just stamid dechia. It's a gavaldic answer. But the Rif holds that it's not an answer. He nicely paskins like Rav Sheshis that even dvarim tuna bracha lecha mekaman does need a bracha. That we don't say the kiva hadar. The Balamor.
Is that because of the answer the Gemara brings by Rabbi Yochanan? Like how Rabbi Yochanan was basically able to interpret the brisa to not be a tiyufta? They bring the machlokas of the Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda, and then they want to say that that's a tiyufta of Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, well, why? I could have explained the brisa differently.
Rabbi Yochanan was, yeah. So I mean, it gets involved with the shala of I mean, it could be a rot. Well, the gears of the Rif would be the other Rishonim say the Balamor and the Ravid says that their gore is not Tanya Kavase der Pista, but Tanya Kavase der Yochanan. That's how their gore is. Tanya Kavase der Yochanan, which then they have a problem with that. How could it be we had a Tziyufta now a Raya? So we don't find like that anywhere in Shas. And the Balamor wants to say a Chiddush that maybe that it's not really the Gemara that brings this abundance for Roy after the Gemara. That's why it's out of nature, out of character, because it's not really the Gemara bringing it. It's later Rabbanan Sarod that they were masakin the Gifts of Shas. They brought it down.
So if you said that, let's say, so then you have one tiyufta of Rabbi Yochanan, and then you have one support of Rabbi Yochanan. Then it would make sense that why would that then follow that the halacha would follow Rav Sheshis, just Rav Chazda, because we don't have any support now for Rav Chizda, because that support that Rav Chizda was for Rabbi Yochanan.
No, yeah, that we won't bring right from that price. We're just bringing right from the original price that we asked the kasha, that we brought a ride to Rav Sheshis from this whole long price in the beginning. We'll call it. We have the first price that we brought of the Yatsu Lukas Chas and Kala. We have the second price of Reguda Rabbanan. The third price that's Tanya Kavase. That I'm not sure where that came from, and so the Rif just goes with this pashtus of Gemara that we brought a ride through Sheshis, and we're not makabel the answer that it's for some reason he thinks maybe the second brisa is a mistake or something. So the ikar brisa we have over here is really the first brisa.
Which is a support to Rav Sheshis.
That's what it recommends.
Okay.
So the the Balamor wants to say a chiddush that a different shot in the final brisa when it says akru, that we're talking about yayin over there, and the Balamor learns like the Rif that devarma tuna brach lacham makom is only by things which are, like we said, pas or mizonos. So, and the chora, the raya to the Rashbam was that it says lashon akru. So we see it's talking about devarma tuna. So it's a double raya to the Rashbam. It's a raya that we pass on Christed. It's a raya that yayin is called devarma tuna because otherwise it wouldn't be a lashon akru. That's what that was the Rashbam's raya. The Balamor wants to answer that raya to say, extending Geshmak, that he has a whole cheshbon worked out. That really the diuk from the original brisa when it said akru, the fact that it says akru, that's a raya that we're in the middle of a kviya suda, which is dvar mituna brach lachamakomum. The Balamor says the raya is not really from the lashon of akru. The lashon itself, akru, could just mean, we find this all over, just means they got up and went somewhere else. Doesn't mean that there was. It's going about. Akru is going where they're going, not on what they're coming from necessarily. What's really the raya? The raya really is that the fact that the brisa requires that they're akru to go out likras chas and likras kala. That the only reason they're allowed to go out would be because they're going to the Dvar Mitzvah. If not for the fact it was a Dvar mitzvah, it should be also to go out. Why? Because you're in the middle of if it's Dvar into the bracha l'chamukaman, then there's no problem at all. You can always bench wherever you are. There's no chiyuv to bench where you are. You don't need a heter of tzarach mitzvah to come on to why you were allowed to leave this place and go to somewhere else. Just leave because you want to leave. You can leave because you feel like it. You want to go and talk to your friend. So the fact that the Bryce places a requirement on leaving to be that even when there are people there, you left kol of a zaken. The only reason you're allowed to leave is because you weren't the Dvar mitzvah. That for sure would not apply if it was Dvar intunim. So it must be we're talking about Dvar intunim bracha l'chamukaman. They need it in this place, and even though you have mixus chaverim there or zaken mechola there, the only reason you're allowed to leave is because it's the Dvar mitzvah. So the raya is not from the word akru, but it's from akru likros chasan likros kala. It's just a remiss to the whole line over there that they got up to leave for the tzarach mitzvah, and only for that reason they could leave. So therefore, in the second bright, in the last bright, the third bright, where it says Tanya Kavase Duchista, that they were Misuvin Lishtas Yain V'Okra Gleim, it doesn't say and why they're Okra Gleim. It shows that they can be Okra Gleim for whatever they want. So then the fact there's no riot, it's considered Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman in there because they're allowed to go for anything. So therefore, for Keret, it's a riot that Yain is not Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman. So it's not really a riot to a chista. It can't be a riot to a chista. It's not talking about Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman. So that's the hochacha that we have to be goris in that Tanya Kavase der Yochanan, not Tanya Kavase der Chista, because that price has nothing to do with Rechista. Rechista has to do with Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman, and that price is talking about Dvar Mitzuna Ein Tuna Bracha L'Chamukaman. So that's the raya that we're goris for Yochanan and not Rechista in the Tanya Kavase.
So according to that Torah, wouldn't you have to say also that the second brisa that we brought of Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda, where it says that they left behind Bnei Chabura to go to the Beit Kinishta or the Beis Medrash, over there also you'd have to say that they were going for the sake of a mitzvah, even though I think we had explained it previously that it was like they weren't going there to daven, because otherwise that would have been the same case as the Gemara that says that they were going, like if a person was in the middle of his meal and he interrupted the davening, that wasn't considered a hefsek. So we said that the brisa, I think, was specifically not that case. It must have been like they went to go just like put stuff down or something like that. I think we said that in the previous year. So you'd have to explain like this was like not just time to put like their kuracha down, but it was like they were actually going to do some kind of a mitzvah, maybe not davening, but something else. Otherwise, the second brisa would also be Rabbi Yochanan.
Yeah, right. And Hanami, you're right. Yeah, very good. And it says also Lashon Akra there too. But it has right. Akru with the whole hemshah. Akra Gleim, Leila Chavesik Nesses, Olivus Medrash. So in Hanami.
Right.
Right. Very good. Okay, very good. So the Ramban on Lachamas says that he sort of has it's me on the Balamor that why do I have to go so far to prove it from the whole hemshah Lashon that it's talking about Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman. It's more Pashat Raya that is even more Pashat Raya. It says, Tov Mizeh, B'Tanya Akra Latzes Geshem Yotzin Tuna Bracha L'Mafreya. The fact that it says at all, if they're Okra Gleim, they need a Bracha L'Mafreya before they leave. Alma Ben Kaman Hemavarchin. It must be that they're supposed to bench where they are. Though Havalah this maybe Yatzel Likros Chasan Esakal should have just said the fact that it requires a bracha before they leave. Obviously, we're talking about the Dvar Mitzuna Bracha L'Chamukaman. That's by its very pairs of those words. It means that's why you have to make a bracha before you leave. But if we're just talking about the 8 apples and they have to make a brain of fashas, then there's no reason to make a bracha before they leave. They can make it on the way and make it wherever they are. It's just Pashup shot in the rice that we're talking about that. And secondly, he says that there's no says that Shinu Makom in Shinu Makom Matino Bracha La'achrav Ben Shachazar L'Mkama Ben Sha'achal L'Mkama Acher Ela B'Dvarim Shetuna Bracha La'achrav L'Mkama. The Shinu Makom, it's very important words of the Ramban. So again, I'll read it. Odani Omer, in Shinui Mokum Matino Bracha La'achrov. Shinui Mokum does not require you to make a bracha after it. Whether you ate when you came back where you started from, or you ate in another place. Only by something which is ton bracha lachem mukamah. If we have time, she is kir balamor. For that very reason, like the Balamor says, that maybe you'll spend too much time in a new place, and you're not going to be able to make a after bracha unless you make it. You might pass by too much time. When you come back, if it's dvarim she'ein tunin, then you would not have to make a bracha when you come back, because there was no hefsek. When you come back to the same place, you would not have to make another bracha. Hilkach midaktani akru tuna bracha mafreya. Therefore, when it says that when they're okir, they have to make a bracha before they leave. That's how we know that we're talking about bracha during tuna bracha lachem kamam. It's a perish nachon rebor. These words in the Ramban seem to be mamish mikatza lakatza against the Rashban. The Ramban is saying a pelagic thing. He's saying that when is it that there's a din, you have to make a new bracha, either a new place you went or the place you came back. That's only by dvarim hatuna bracha lachem kamam. But by dvarim into the bracha lachem kamam, that you wouldn't have to. If you go to a new place, you could make it. If there's no real hesek hadas, then you could make a bracha. You can keep eating over there, or when you come back as well. I'm not sure exactly where you went according to the Ramban to say this, or how far, where you went, how far you went, but the Ramban said the exact opposite. And starting off the sugya, that's Pasha's the sugya, is the exact opposite. That the dharma to tuna bracha lachem kaman, that would say the kiva hadar, you're still considered in the middle of the suda. And dharma she'ein tuna bracha lachem kaman, since there's nothing tying you to, there's no leash tying you to the original place, then wherever you go is a new thing. It's a nucleus. Exact opposite of the Ramban. So I think the Sfor of the Ramban is really, we see in the Ravid. The Ravid says, "Aval dvarim shetunin bracha lemukoman kein she'ein reshoyim latzeis afilu lemitzvah ad sheyivarchu shem yishkachu milachzor." By dvarim tunim, in the case of Chisda, when you don't leave mitzvahs chaverim or you don't leave zaken machola, and the Ravid in Os Beis, he says that since you were not allowed to leave, if you didn't leave people there, you weren't allowed to leave, even for a mitzvah, until you make a bracha, Shem Yishkachu Laksor. Im Chazur Nami Tuna Bracha B'Tchila Shari Siku Hefsek Gomer. You left a Hefsek Gomer when you left. So I think what the Ravid is telling us is a Gavaldig Sfor. He's saying that this din to make a bracha before you leave, if you did not leave zaken v'chola there, even the tzorach mitzvah you're not allowed to leave until you bench first. Right? That's what comes out from the brisa. That's why we say tunim bracha l'mafreya before you leave, when lo hinichu zaken v'chola. And that was the right against Rakisto. So the sfor of that is to say, why is that so? Because since you're not allowed to leave, you cannot say the kibi hadar. Because for carrot, since you weren't allowed to leave was be'isr. And the isr creates a hefsek gomer in the Hemshech HaSuda. I think it's similar to what we saw, a little bit similar to what we saw in the Rif that held in the dinner Paras Mapa Makadesh. That since the Rif held over there, they had to make a new emotzi when you're Paras Mapa Makadesh. Because since you're not allowed to eat until you make Kiddush, the isr, like the Ramban said over there, the isr creates a matzav of the Isra Achila creates a matzah of hefsek, and you need a new amotzi. So there it's a little bit less because you're still in the same place, mamish. Therefore, you need a motzi and not benching. That was the Balmor, the Rift, that whole thing over there. That the Balmor asked that if you need to make a motzi, you should need a bench also. The Balmor understood the Rift that it's mamish and new suda. So there it's a little different because you didn't leave. So the Rift held that ensures that it contains somewhat the same suda. The Isra only creates a hefsek l'gabi bracha rishona. But here when you mamish left, and you left the Isser, the Ravid says that now you left the Isser, so the Isser is now it's the Isra Achila. When Chazal said it, it's not just the Eitzah Tova like the Rush says, but it goes a step further. It's Mamish and Isser, and that Isser creates an Isra Achila until you bench, because the Isser was Mafsik the Suda. And that's what the Ramban means to say that only by Dvarim she'ein tuna bracha lechem mukaman, you can come back and continue eating without a bracha, but by she'tunin bracha lechem mukaman, there, since they had a chiyuv to bench first, then that was mafsek the suda. Now you have a chiyuv to bench when you come back. So this is mamish v'katza l'katza. If it bothered me first right away, according to the opposite for the Rashbam, it occurred to me that, of course, it's the opposite of the Rashbam, because they're all going in Risheshus. They're going in what's shot in the Raya, the Brisa, in their paskening. The Ramban is going with the Rif, the Balamur, and the Raya is all going with the Rif, like the Raya that spells out halacha Risheshus. They're all explaining this for of Risheshus. Why do Risheshus hold that by Dvarim Tuna Bracha Lachem Kolman it is a hefsek? They're saying because the soda of Risheshus is that since Chazal were cautious to leave, you're not supposed to, you can't bench over there where you're going. Therefore, you might be mamshech and not bench. You might lose the benching completely. Therefore, they created an Isser Yitzia, and that Isser Yitzia is mafsek the Suda. If you over that Isser, then it's hefsek in the Suda Lagamre, and that's why even when you come back, you need to need a bench before you can eat anything new, because it's not the same Suda anymore. Isser created like Tashan arrived at it created where's the Ramban, that it's the Ravid said, Shari Hefsiku Hefsek Gomer. Hefsek Gomer is the Isser that you were over by not benching before you left. And that created an Isser Achila, and therefore you need to bench, because that Isser Achila was Mafsek in the Suda. And all your das in the world won't help if there's an Isser there in front of you to eat anything more. So it comes out then that the machlok, whether there's this Isser or not, whether there's this Isser Achila or not, will be the Nekudas HaMachlokas between Rav Sheshes and Rav Chisda. That their mamish cholek, it comes out mikatza lekatza mitzarecha, but the Sforas HaMachlokas is that according to the Nekudas HaMachlokas now, that according to Rav Chisda, the Machayev to come back and bench in this place, that kept you tied with a leash onto this place, and you always are considered in that Suda. The fact that you left Isser, so according to the Rashbam, it's very geshmak, it's easy to hear. According to Rashbam, so the Isser is only, it can't be a hefsek in the Etzem Suda, because the whole reason to bench in the first place, in the original place to begin with, is only a dimitzad the cheshivas of the bracha. So since we're only talking about the mitzad the cheshivas of the bracha, it's not mistaber that they created an Isser in the Etzem Mechilas Asuda because of that. It was something that's chala in the Etzem Guf Asuda. Because we're not even talking about the Guf Asuda, we're talking about cheshivas of bracha that causes us to go back. Even according to Tosfos that it isn't done in the Suda, still, lav dafka, it's an Isser mamish. It could be more of an Eitzah Tova kamashmalan to do it. They didn't mamish create an Isser. It's more of an Eitzah Tova. And Eitzah Tova is not going to create an Isser to be mafsek in the Guf Suda either. That's the other way to get out of this. But these other Rishonim are learning that the Nekudas HaMachlokas, the Chisda will hold that you're mamshech the same Suda. Risheshus holds no, that since it's an Akira of the Suda because of the Isser Shaboy, so then that's the raya from this brisa that we're staying with this brisa. We're not saying Terutzim, it's a Rehuda, whatever. We're staying with this brisa. Then the Isser creates a matzah of hefsek in the Suda and requires a new bracha.
So we're saying that the Rif holds that it's an actual like takana that they would have to bench lemafreya, not staminate Eitzah Tova.
Right, and if you don't do that before you leave, then you're over the Isser of leaving like that, and so now that created an Isser of Achila until you actually bench and fulfill that takana.
So then now let's say that if a person did leave and he didn't bench, then when he would come back, he would have to bench according to the Rif. But according to Tosfos, it would sound like he does not have to.
Right.
It's just an Eitzah Tova.
It's only Eitzah Tova, right. or it's either an Tova or a takana that they didn't make that quite that severely. It's a takana mishum Tova sort of thing, but they didn't actually. It's not that strong of a takana that they created an Isra Achila mamash without fulfilling the takana out of soap and benching. So in other words, it did not create a real Isra Achila. They just created a chiyuv to bench, but not an Isra Achila. They didn't take it to the next step that the chiyuv benching created an Isra Achila till you bench, and therefore not that level of a hefsek. It's only a hefsek legabi bracha rishona, like Tos says at the end, not legabi bracha achona, not to have to bench when you come back. So you can't eat without making a new bracha, new emotzi, but you don't have to bench first. You make one benching at the end because, like the Marshal says in Tosas, the fact that you only have to make a bracha rishona, that shows that you're still considered in the same suda. Similar to that, Tosas is very similar to the Rif by Poras Mapa and Makadosh. That over there also you make a bracha rishona because the chiyuv of kiddush, and it created there, some level of an iser. Or either Isser or that was the other side. It was EF Shar. It was a thing we have to do, and it's EF Shar. That was the other side over there. But Sof Kol Sof, it's considered the same Suda to make one benching on the whole thing, even though you have to make a new emotzi. So Tosus, like the Shamash, that it makes many emotzis, but only one benching. And according to Tosus, it's similar over here. If you leave by Dvarma Tunim, the fact that you do have to come back because the Suda is Machavi to come back to it. So then that's what ties you to it, and therefore you're not really mafsek. It doesn't create a new suda because you're always connected to it, but it's enough of a hefsek to have to make a bracha rishona. So that's I think the Seder Advarim and the Rishonim over here. There's a whole other nakuda here, which I think we're not going to go into now with Rosh Bam. It takes us to a whole different sugya completely, but so. I think this is a good foundation for us now to learn Siman Kufa and Ches and Hilchos Brachas. So I'll just send out the Mamakomasters that we need to sort of split it up over the next couple of weeks. It's also break weeks for people. It's winter breaks and everything like that. So we'll put the brakes on the break a little bit. If there's still serious stuff to do, we'll spread it over 2 weeks instead of 1 week over the next 2 weeks. So I'll send it out that we want to do all the tour, Beis Yosef, and Shulchan Aruch of Siman Kufa and Ches over the next 2 weeks, and then we'll talk about it. We'll see whether we will or will not have a shiur next week, but we'll do that over the next 2 weeks.
We should see the whole Siman Kufa and Ches over the next 2 weeks. Tour Beis Yosef, Shulchan Aruch, and the Nosei Kelim.
Yeah, and it would be very kedai to not just. I mean, there's a lot of Mishnah Berurah, but there's very, very chashuv tazas and Magen Avrahams and everything. So hopefully over the next 2 weeks, it's not really that much. It's a serious not to do. It'll keep us busy, but it's doable over the next 2 weeks to get all through that. And it's also a nice chunk of halacha, very serious, kinyan halacha, and that whole Siman Kufa and Ches. It's ramifications other places, Shinei Makom and Hefsek and Suda and Hesek Adas, and a lot of chashuv things there. Okay. All the best.
Thank you, Abby. Have a great week.
Take care, you too. Call to.
Thank you.